Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. President Biden stepping up his re-election campaign by reaching out to red state voters, but his Bidenomics agenda facing some backlash among Republicans. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more from the White House.
As part of his national tour to tout federal investments, President Biden on Thursday traveled to South Carolina, where he tried to convince voters there that his Bidenomics agenda is actually helping even red states.
Investing in America. In fact, some analysis have said that the laws I've signed are going to do more to help red America than blue America. Well, that's okay with me because we're all Americans.
For almost half a century, South Carolina has not voted for even a single Democrat in presidential elections. And Biden's trip there on Thursday also comes on the heels of a massive Trump rally this past weekend, where some 50,000 supporters showed up in a small city of just over 3,000 residents.
Thank you to South Carolina.
But President Biden on Thursday told South Carolinians that Republicans were doing harm to jobs and the economy, particularly by voting against his legislative agenda.
Every Republican member of the House in this state voted to repeal the clean energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. That attracted all these jobs.
And President Biden says that his renewable energy initiatives are bringing jobs to states including South Carolina. But Republicans who voted against these initiatives said that they were only wasting money and fueling inflation.
Every single month since he's been in office, except for one, inflation outpacing increases in wages.
And today, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who's also running for president, said that he wanted an apology from President Biden for what he called the failure of Bidenomics. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And will an arrest take place following the discovery of cocaine in the West Wing of the White House? That's what one senator wants to know, and he's pressing the Secret Service for answers. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more details on the Secret Service's ongoing investigation.
The Secret Service has confirmed that cocaine was found in a foot traffic heavy area in the West Wing of the White House last weekend, and they are trying to discover who it was. They say it may have been a person who works at the White House or somebody who is authorized to have been in the area. The Secret Service is also now doing fingerprinting to find out exactly who it was. Meanwhile, Senator Tom Cotton is already pressing on whether or not there will be prosecutions under the law. Senator Cotton pressed the Secret Service to provide him answers to questions by a next Friday deadline. Questions including, will they make an arrest after finding out who brought in the cocaine, who has access to the White House without security screening or with lesser security screening, and more. And one ex-Secret Service agent says that even if the person was screened properly, it could easily be missed because those screen detectors are meant for detecting metal and not small substances.
These are magnetometers. They're looking for weapons and they're looking for any biochemical agents. This dime-sized bag, which is really small, that can pass through. Somebody can hide that somewhere. You're not strip searching people.
The chief of communications for the Secret Service told the Epoch Times that they're working very hard, trying their best to identify who exactly it was, and they will be monitoring and analyzing their screening process to determine any hazards in that process. Meanwhile, the White House has so far been tight-lipped.
I just don't have anything more to share. It is under investigation by the Secret Service. This is in their purview.
And President Biden was asked questions about this when he departed for South Carolina this morning, but he did not answer those questions as he boarded Air Force One. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
And joining us next to discuss the 2024 Republican presidential primary, we have former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So we're seeing some of these presidential campaigns taking shape. Trump's still in a commanding lead, but a little bit of movement at the lower end. You have Vivek bumping up in certain polls. What's your take on the Republican primary thus far?
Well, at this point, there's still it's developing, but it's still a Trump primary at this point. I don't see, there's been no movement. If I was some of the candidates and spending the amount of money they're spending right now, to not see movement in the national polls it would be very concerning. And not just that, the state polls that I'm seeing as well, if anything, Trump's lead's growing in places like South Carolina, New Hampshire, and other places. So right now, I think it's a battle for, this sort of the second place. And the hope, I think, in many of the campaigns, which I don't think will happen, is that something happens that Trump is not a part of it by the time they get to Iowa. Because really, there's about a 35 to 45% higher base of Trump voters in these primaries that will not vote for anybody but him in these primaries.
Fascinating stuff, Congressman. According to the Trump campaign, they've nearly doubled their fundraising in Q2 from Q1, raking in about $35 million in Q2. Why do you think that is, and how significant is it?
Well, I mean, it's an infrastructure that's been built for a number of years now. You're talking on 6-7 years now that he's been building this infrastructure base of fundraising, and people are responding to it. Look, I mean, he's still popular. Whether the mainstream media or folks who don't like Trump don't like it, he's still very popular with average people. He's still very popular with the base. I mean, those numbers were raised with, I think it was an average of, $30 a donation. So he's still able to connect with people in a way. And I think a lot of people are now associating a lot of his issues, past presidency, with the issues that he had with the left and the media trying to take him down during his presidency. So I think it's a little bit of an overlap there. But he's always been popular, and as long as he's on this ballot, he will remain popular and be able to raise money.
So one of the big issues that Trump got a lot of credit for was being pretty tough on crime. We're just off the heels here of an extremely violent 4th of July weekend. Many have pointed to soft on crime district attorneys. You actually authored the First Step Act, which is important because it gives hope on the other side of incarceration. How do we make our country and cities safer?
Well, the first off is differentiate between criminal justice reform that I did and President Trump signed, like the First Step Act, working with those who are paying their debt to society, but making sure that when they get out, they're not recidivizing. That's what actually, that act did. What we're seeing in our cities right now is you got to fund the police. You got to give them the backup. You got to have prosecutors who are willing to live up to their prosecutorial oath to actually prosecute crimes. You got to have legislatures who are not decriminalizing and making $1,000 and under petty theft in which they just walk out or they're not tried at all. These are the kind of things that make our cities and our streets unsafe. It is those kind of things that actually waste taxpayer dollars and make people scared to be in the cities. Whereas real criminal justice reform says, look, we're going to fund our police, we're going to keep our society safe, but we're going to also have sentences that match the crime. And then we're also going to say when you go to jail and you pay your crime, then you have an opportunity to fix things that are broken in your life, whether it be education, whether it be mental health, whether it be addictions, so that when you come out that you're not going to recidivize. But right now, it's a mockery of what the left is doing with quote criminal justice reform in these big cities.
So I mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy at the top of our interview here, who's moving up in the polls. One of the things his campaign is doing is actually taking his message to the inner cities. How important is it for Republicans to do that?
Why would we leave it off the table? This has always bothered me about, I've made this statement just recently. I saw where Republicans were fighting about Robert's Rules of Order. I am so sick of Republican meetings about Robert's Rules of Order. Why don't they worry about who the voters are in their district? Why don't they voters in their communities who have been voting Democrat go into it? I commend Ramaswamy for going into these areas because, these are voters too. These are people with families. These are people who want to live safe. They want the best for their children. Again, when Republicans limit ourselves to certain areas of the country, and like Democrats have basically done with some of their far left policies, then we're not becoming the country we need to be. Republicans' conservative ideas are the best ideas, and I believe when properly talked about, we actually gain voters. We don't lose voters.
Former Congressman Doug Collins, thank you so much for joining us.
It's always good to be with you. Take care.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.